Why is it that many of the greatest defenders of the Christian faith have been lawyers? And what do you think most of those lawyers would say about Paul Tillich's statement? If the resurrection didn't take place, it wouldn't hurt the Christian faith. You could still have the Christian faith without the historical event of the resurrection. What do you think most of the lawyers would say about that?
Well, it's fascinating to see what a legal scholar recently had to say about that kind of liberal reasoning. He wasn't referring specifically to Tillich. He was referring to those higher critics of the Bible that say it doesn't make any difference whether this material is sound historically. We can still have a faith experience of Jesus. This kind of business. The man is Professor Sherwin White. He is an English scholar and delivered a series of lectures at the University of Oxford, a lecture series entitled Roman Society and Roman Law in the New Testament. And he uses the New Testament as a basis for his conclusions about the nature of the Roman legal system. So he finally had to come down to the question of how sound those documents were. And he said, I listened to liberal theologians, and the liberal theologians give me the impression that you can't get any kind of solid historical picture of Jesus, and that it doesn't make any difference. Says Sherwin White, this is very curious. Curious is the English equivalent of nutty in American English. This is very curious when we look at these documents, because we look at them and they purport to be setting forth historical fact. The people say, we have not followed cunningly devised fables when we made known to you the facts concerning Jesus. We were eyewitnesses of him. And Sherwin White says, we compare this with the other documents of antiquity, and both are trying to do the same thing. He says, take the best-known contemporary of Jesus Christ, Tiberius Caesar. What we know of Tiberius from four documents, and none of them is as good as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And yet, we all consider that the evidence is sufficient for a decent historical picture of Tiberius Caesar. So Sherwin White is saying, from a lawyer's perspective, these theologians are a strange breed of cat. What we ought to do is to get down to the evidence and stop a great deal of the speculation that they're engaged in.
As both a theologian and an attorney, what do you think about Tillich's statement?
I think it's nonsense. If Jesus Christ didn't rise from the dead, I would instantly seek another profession or kill myself, probably the latter, because life would not have any meaning. The fact is that the truth of Christianity is directly dependent upon whether Jesus rose again from the dead.
Yeah, let's stay in that area just for a flash, because we have a lot of people in churches that do not preach the literal resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and furthermore, their pastors would tell them it doesn't make any difference. Let's talk about that one more time. Why does it make a difference, and what would you say to their pastors and to the philosophers and professors that taught those pastors?
Well, if Jesus didn't rise again from the dead, there is no evidence that he was the person he claimed to be. How does he differ then from Jim Jones, who gets a crowd of people around him and persuades them that he is some special kind of person, or Father Divine, whom you mentioned? The situation then turns out to be one where people are worshiping simply because it makes them feel good. Moreover, there isn't any gospel left if Jesus didn't rise again from the dead, because the gospel consists of his death for our sins and his resurrection for our justification. If he never rose again from the dead, then he never conquered death, and if he never conquered death, there's no reason to think that the problem of sin and evil in the human heart is dealt with either. The whole Christian faith collapses. I think it's too bad that it isn't possible to remove clergy from their position who would try to eliminate the resurrection. My goodness, if you can get thrown out of the medical profession or the legal profession for malpractice as easily as you can, it's too bad that there's so many clergy around who are literally cutting off the limb